Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. And as the title of today's video alluded to, we are going to try to hit a bunch of different topics because right now, as 2021 stands, we are starting to see a little bit of a dip, a little bit of a downtrend in the Pokemon hobby. So that kind of just leaves you in a certain area, a certain situation where you have to start making some decisions. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Do you want to buy, sell, hold, open product, or just panic sell? Because right now, those feel like the only options, or at least the options I'm seeing a lot of people really weigh the pros and cons for. So that's just what we're going to do in this video. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each one and where should you be right now in the hobby. We're just going to jump right into this in no particular order, and we're just going to talk about if you want to be a buyer in this market. Yeah, you know what? There might be a lot of buying opportunities right now, especially with the dip we're seeing. But as you guys have seen in my videos before, I have showed what a graph of bubbles look like. And there is that very important part to look at, the part where it's the bull trap. And pretty much what happens is the market starts to dip real hard. A lot of people that are very bullish on the market hop in. They start buying up a lot of product. You see another initial spike, and then eventually that wears out a little bit. And then you start to see another crash happen. So you do always have to keep that in the back of your mind, especially when you're being a buyer in this hobby. But right now, if you were to take my advice, and if you were a buyer, it depends what you're doing. Sure, you always have undervalued sets and stuff like that, but we're really going to kind of focus more on modern for this video. I do believe that vintage is where you should be. I definitely think that's where the safest money is. That's where I don't expect to see as large percentage-wise of retractions. But it still begs a question, okay, if you do want to make the conscious decision, knowing that there's a lot of danger in the market, knowing that print runs can potentially be very large, that demand is weaning, but you still want to go in, you still want to pick up modern product, where should your money be going? Where are more of the safer products to kind of invest your money in? And again, I'm not an investment advisor. So, I feel like I have to say that in every video, otherwise people get mad. But with that said, right now nothing is really 100% safe. Everything is always speculative, and speculative being the key word. But if I were to be buying modern right now, I would try to really be sticking with just booster boxes. And the reason why is because you really want to keep your initial investment and your cost per pack at the very lowest possible price point you can be. And the only way you're really going to find the absolute lowest price point per pack is going to be at booster boxes. But I'm not going to tell you either, if you are a collector of, say, ETBs, yeah, go out, get one of each artwork, that's fine. Now, the question, begs to be asked, well, if you're going to go out and buy 10 or 20 ETBs to sit on, there's a lot of apparent risk that comes with that. And you really got to be careful if that's what you want to do. Where I would probably stay away from, or I wouldn't really be going super hard in, is like the different collection boxes, tins right now, really loose packs, especially when it comes to single pack blisters. Sure, are there always exceptions for different collection boxes, different check lane blisters, 3-pack, single pack, whatever, when it comes to promo cards? Yes, of course. If you do see a product come rolling across that has a amazing promo that you think that promo alone makes it worth it to buy that set, sure, there are always exceptions to that. But where I would feel very safe is, when it comes to modern, is with new booster boxes at release. Again, a very large caveat to this is if you're going to stick with modern booster boxes, you really need to get that product at or as close to MSRP as you possibly can. And then that really brings up a question. Do you expect the market to rise in the very, very near future? Or do you still expect the market to continue the downtrend that we're currently seeing? Because if you expect the downtrend that we're currently seeing to continue, then you really want to be at booster boxes at MSRP. And you don't want to pay anything over. And if that means you have to wait for the initial release, let a couple waves roll through, wait for prices to drop to the absolute bottom, and then get in. Yeah, that is definitely where I think you should be. Does that come with apparent risk? Yes. The apparent risk being very simple. If you wait on product and you expect prices to drop, and for whatever reason demand increases extremely fast, yeah, you might be left without product now because you're waiting for prices to drop. So there's always risk that comes with all this stuff. But I'm not also saying to just not go out and buy modern at all. I'm just letting you guys know. You got to be smart if you're going to continue the buy into this market. And if you're going to buy, you really need to educate yourself when it comes outside of modern and you really start to go at vintage. You really need to look at vintage as a whole, because if you're going to put your money in certain areas of vintage, whether it's raw cards, graded cards, or sealed product, you really have to understand the sets. You really have to understand what drove demand for a lot of these prices, for a lot of these sealed products, a lot of these singles, a lot of these graded cards. You know, you got to look at it. You got to make real informed, educated decisions. And that's, nothing that this channel will be able to teach you as a whole. You're really going to just start to do the homework, really start to understand the sets and cards, and hopefully, if you are going to continue to buy into this market, you're going to be buying in with what I call very smart, very well-researched money, because there are so many opportunities out there. There is a part of me that believes that a lot of these opportunities could potentially be good deals, but there's so much risk that comes with all this. You guys just have to be very, very careful, very understanding of what you're doing. When it comes to single prices, you're really going to have to look at cards condition, because eventually your end goal for singles, in my opinion, should be to have them graded at some point down the line. And if you can pick up raw singles for extremely cheap, yeah, they could be very good long-term investments. And why I say they could be very good long-term investments is if you believe that the hype is going to drop in the near term, eventually grading card companies will start opening up. Eventually they'll start opening up different tiers until eventually those bulk tiers are open. You can send your cards away for grading. And if we ever do see another, huge run up like we saw in 2020, which may or may not be one of those black swan events that we never see again, but in the event that we do see, some sort of event, or maybe not even event, if we just see what a lot of people expected to happen, a slow, gradual increase in price over 5 or 10 years, if you believe that and you still believe that that is a true fundamental of your buying and your investing, sure, by picking up cards now, getting them ready, you can be in it for the long term. And when prices do peak for those cards in, say, 10 years, you will be 100% in position, 100% ready to, flip those cards for a profit, because by that point, years have passed, grading has been open, you sent that card away for grading, you have it slabbed, it's in your collection, and you're just waiting. Yeah, that is a super long term. You have to really be mindful of the future. It's very hard to predict future prices, even harder to predict future demand. But at the same time, you got to go with your gut with a lot of this. And, you ask me my opinion, do I think Pokemon is going to disappear in 10 years? No. I think it's going to be very strong. Do I think that there's going to be other catalysts that are going to happen in the next 10 years to create more demand? Sure. What those are, it's impossible to say. And when they're going to happen, even harder. Next question you got to ask yourself is, do you want to be a seller in this market? Because I'll tell you what, right now, in the history of this hobby, the prices we're still seeing products sell at are still very good prices. Pokemon is so far from hitting the bottom that there are some really good deals out there, putting your cards out on the market and still getting a premium for a lot of cards when you compare prices of just a year or two ago. Now, the big caveat is that, are you newer to the hobby? Are you been around? What part of your collection are you selling? At what point in the market did you buy that area of your collection? Were you smart? Had you always been a value collector, meaning you're a value collector, you always shopped around for best deals, and now you're still in a very good position? If that's the case, you know, it's always wise to sell into the market. But the way I am is I'm always buying, but I'm always selling into every market. It doesn't matter if the market's going up or if the market's going down. In my opinion, if you don't even really need to time anything at that point, as long as you constantly have product coming in and coming out and you have a relatively quick turnaround time on a lot of this stuff, you can be, I wouldn't say you're safe, but you're definitely better positioned in situations where you're more fluid and you're able to react much quicker than a lot of other people who might be into certain products already at a much higher dollar amount, and they need prices to increase pretty exponential to start to see a lot of, gains. And if prices do drop, the amount of money that they lose adds up very quickly. So, there's a lot of issues with that. But if you're constantly buying and selling, no matter where the market is, relatively, you'll be okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just that simple. The problem is, especially when it comes to grading card companies, stuff like that, you send away maybe a lot of cards, hoping to get them back, and the market still being relatively strong, with the flood of returns that's going to happen. That can make selling very tough sometimes when you have money tied up in the long term, and especially you have money tied up in cards and you really do not know what the prices for those cards will be in a year or two. So that's always the dangers of selling. But listen, there's plenty of upsides of selling too. And there are always deals and there's always cards that sell for a lot in every single market. It's just a matter of what side of the coin do you want to be on. And, there is no perfect, no right or wrong answer when it comes to selling into any market. And the fear for selling is always simple. You could always be worried that you might be selling when the market is going to start rising up, and therefore you're not going to get as much money for your product as you might have if you held on to it a month or two. Or you might sell your product now and you see that product lose 30% in a month. So you made a great decision. It's really hard to tell. If anybody had a crystal ball when it came to the Pokemon market, those people would be multi-millionaires, but if you could play the market. But it's hard to play the Pokemon market just like it is the regular stock market. But at the end of the day, if you have good fundamentals, if you set price points in mind, if you set percentage gains for a lot of these cards, really start to diversify, the cards you're going to sell, figure out how long you want to be in these cards. My opinion and my suggestion to a lot of people is to constantly have inventory coming in and coming out. So you are always in some sort of position to capitalize in different areas of the markets when good deals or areas of the market start to heat up. In order to position yourself for that sort of investing, it's very tough because it does take a lot of initial capital in order to position yourself in so many different areas of the hobby. But at the same time, you got to be real careful, because I've always recommended, don't ever spread yourself out so thin in this hobby that you have more money out than you're willing to lose. Next thing you can do is just hold, because you don't care if Pokemon just has temporary price increases. The prices drop, the prices rise again, prices continue to drop. As long as you believe that Pokemon's trajectory in the long term, whether it's 5-10 years, is going to be an upward trend, and where you see yourself now, as long as you continue to hold on to product, you do expect it to rise in the future. Yeah, that's a very good strategy. The problem is of course your money is tied up for an extremely long amount of time, and sometimes holding could really be almost an indefinite amount of time, because like I said just a little while ago, no one has a crystal ball. But holding has the best arguments for the entire hobby. And when I say holding has the best arguments, meaning anybody who had really held, it doesn't matter what set, what timeline, what period of the hobby, if people held to today, every single product has gone up. And there's always the exact same argument that happens. Just like we're having the arguments today about all the Sword and Shield sets, Battle Styles, Chill and Reigns, Eevee Heroes, Vivid Voltage, Darkness Ablaze, Rebel Clash, it doesn't matter. Everybody has the same conversation. Pokemon is going to continue the print. Modern will be worthless in the future. And doesn't matter the set, it doesn't matter the timeline. You could have that exact same conversation, but instead of in 2021 saying Rebel Clash will be worthless in the future, you could go back in time to 2008 and just replace one word in that sentence. Instead of saying Rebel Clash, you can just say Majestic Dawn will be worthless in the future. You can go to 2011. You can say Call of Legends will be worthless in the future. Or you go to 2013 and you can say Plasma Storm will be worthless in the future. And you can have the exact same conversations that we're having today about all the Sword and Shield sets and go back to all these different points of time. It doesn't matter if you even go back to like relatively recent 2014 and say Phantom Forces is never going to be investable. Phantom Forces will get printed to oblivion. Phantom Forces, it's just, you can do that for so many different sets throughout history. And no matter what the argument is for modern, just replace whatever modern set you're currently talking about, and add any name of any set, and it would always be the same. So that's the trouble with modern. But just from a strictly historical sense, and you just say, is holding one of the best investment strategies you can do in the Pokemon hobby? The answer has to be yes, unless people want to just strictly ignore it. And don't get me wrong, there has been so much change that has happened recently, with printing and COVID and people coming into the hobby and all this. Can anybody predict what currently modern is going to do? No. But at the same time, you cannot ignore history, because history does always have a way of repeating itself, and that is something very, very important to keep in mind. And there's always opening packs, and if you guys want to go out there and just open packs, more power to you, because I'll tell you what, there is nothing, in my opinion, that is more Pokemon than just opening packs. I know it's one of my favorite things in this hobby. A lot of the people I've talked to, they say the exact same thing. There's a reason why the most successful, most popular YouTube channels made, a name for themselves by opening packs. Or at least, if that's not how they made their name, that there's at least some sort of pack opening feel to their channel. Because like I said, at the end of the day, pack opening is Pokemon. And it's amazing. But at the same time, opening modern product, opening vintage product, there is a ton of risk that comes with this. First off, you're not guaranteed anything. And when you do pull good cards, there's a decent amount of work to get a return on your investment, or to break even, or to just really go the hard route, which is really the breakdown. Start listing individual cards on TCG Player. Maybe you list individual cards, 99 cents on eBay, stuff like this. Yeah, that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of grinding. For some people, honestly, it's just not worth it to a lot of people. The profit margins are usually not huge. You can be talking pennies. So yeah, to go the opening route can be a lot of work, sure. Can you go open up battle styles? Is there some sort of mathematical formula you can do where what are your chances that if you open 3 packs that they're all going to have a, alternative art in it? Sure. I guess statistically speaking, there is some sort of percentage that just opening 3 packs will all have an alternative art. The likelihood of that happening is, extremely small. So there's just such a risk factor with doing something like that. But at the end of the day, this hobby does not keep going on forever if you were to ever remove the opening factor. And anytime you're going to open product, especially when it comes to modern, you got to be really mindful of, getting that product at MSRP. And on top of that, if you want to go the vintage route, you have to be, first of all, a little crazy. Second of all, extremely high risk tolerance. And number three, you need to go into it expecting to lose money on it. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money, because a lot of people enjoy opening vintage packs, and trust me, I get it. So if that's what you want to do, I can never be the one to tell you not to do that. Just at least understand that there is a relatively decent amount of risk when it comes to that kind of stuff. And for the long-term future of this hobby, do we expect vintage to continue to increase in price, or stay, if not continue to increase in price, but at least continue to hold value and be relatively safe? Yeah, I would say it's very safe. It's definitely not a guarantee by any chance. But when it comes to vintage, the big argument when people open product is they're not printing anymore. So the more product that gets open, the product that you're holding just becomes more scarcer and scarcer and scarcer, until hypothetically a situation, would happen where you have the last of a product. How far we are away from any type of scenario like that playing out is extremely far away. The chances of every single base set booster pack being opened and you having the last one, extremely unlikely. But if people do continue to open, like I said, your pack might just increase just due to the sheer, lack of availability of it, and the fact that it's just going to become super rare in the future. So that's something to at least consider. Now, is the value of the cards inside going to continue or really justify that? Ooh, probably not, or possibly, depending on the set, depending on the hype, depending on the market at the time that you plan on opening that product. It's a lot to consider. Expected value versus realized value. Ugh, those are, impossible to say. And finally, your last option is you could just panic sell. You can absolutely be afraid. You can be in over your head. You could try to flood your cards out into the market as fast as possible. Try to recover as much or as little as your money as you possibly can. And sure, that's definitely a possibility. And we've talked about this in the past. And this is one of my big arguments when it comes to Charizard Shadowless First Editions. My argument is that in the history of Charizards, no one should have ever lost money on that card ever. And people always say, well, what do you mean by that? Because the market for Charizard has always gone up and down. And my argument is the same today as it's always been. Anyone who gets into whatever the top of the hobby is, Charizard First Edition PSA 10 really being the top of the mountain. Sure, there's trophy cards out there, but when it comes to just, set cards, that's definitely at the top of the mountain. So anybody getting into this hobby and to go after the peak of the mountain should, in theory, have no reason to sell that card, because one, they should not be worried about the money. Anytime you go after a card of such high value, you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. So they should never have to sell it in that sense. Number two, they shouldn't want to sell it for less than what they bought it for, because if they're in this hobby for the right reasons, they really should have already valued that card at whatever price they paid for it. I don't care if they bought that Charizard First Edition at $50,000 or they were the ones that set the record at, 300 plus thousand. It doesn't matter. They should have valued that card at whatever they paid for it. So if they're going to start panic selling, then you know what? At the end of the day, they never should have been in that card to begin with. And that's as true in 1999 as it was in 2005, 2010, 2015, 2020, 2021. It's always the same. But the problem is you can say that about panic selling for so much of the market. There were so many people who recently got into the hobby for what I would consider a lot of the wrong reasons. And that was just strictly from an investment standpoint. Or they got into the hobby for the wrong reasons because they were too willing to invest a lot of money without doing enough due diligence, without doing their homework, without really researching products, researching sets, researching scarcity, researching stuff like that. It's very important. So by getting nervous and panic selling, what it means is they broke the number one rule. The number one rule being never invest more than you're willing to lose. Meaning, in a hypothetical situation, if Pokemon went 2-0, while it would definitely suck for them, it would probably be a financial hit, it would still be okay because of rule number one. They only lost as much money as they were willing to lose. You know, I'm not going to make a lot of claims, but I will make this claim. Trust me, though. Pokemon is not going to 0. What it goes to, that is to be determined, but it's not going to 0. So the worst case scenario is it went to 0 and people were just left with the cards. The cards that they should have already enjoyed, should have already appreciated in the first place to even be in the hobby. But you just have people who say all this stuff, but when the prices start to dip, they just panic sell. They panic sell because they're nervous, because they're undereducated, and what happens is you just start to see that cascading effect. Once people start dumping product into the market, they may or may not start creating new price points for a lot of cards because, you know, at the end of the day, the reality is for a lot of Pokemon cards, price points get set by eBay. And the way you set price points on eBay is you just go at recent sold listings. And if somebody dumps, 10 or 15 cards at a very low dollar amount, it's very easy to manipulate the Pokemon hobby. A lot of people know this. It's nothing new. And it doesn't take a lot of cards to really do it. When people go on eBay recently sold listings and they see 5 or 10 sales at a very similar price that's extremely low, yeah, a lot of people could inadvertently make new price floors for cards. And when that happens, it's a cascading effect that could be rippled through the hobby. And, that's the danger of panic selling. But what happens if you have enough panic selling happen? You have new price points for so many cards starting to get established that eventually all those single price points start to add up to the larger picture, and then people they don't feel as confident in other products which might not have been affected by that panic selling of a lot of people. So that's the dangers. Those are the ripple effects that could happen. But you got to be mindful too of all this stuff, and you need to be able to weed through it and see through what's actually happening and look at the actual fundamentals of a lot of these cards, a lot of these sets. A lot of the products we're seeing being sold are still selling at prices that are way higher than the fundamentals really dictate. And those are the products I would definitely want to stay away from. But then you have some cards that are really selling far below the fundamentals of where that card can be. So you got to learn to weed through, and that's the importance of doing your homework, doing your due diligence, really starting to understand the market. And I guarantee you, most of you guys, if you've been in this hobby long enough now, and especially if you're listening to this channel, and especially if you made it this far in the video, yeah, you probably already got a good understanding. But guys, that answers those. And hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do me a favor, go down below, hit that subscribe button if you're still not subscribed. Other than that, hit the like button. Tell me what you guys think about those different topics. Other than that, I'll catch you on the next video.